Let's create a tool stack registration form using the Filament Forms package and Razor UI. Razor UI is a Tailwind component kit that you can buy, and lots of the Filament Forms inputs are based on Razor UI inputs. So that means that they work really well with these layouts. They also work with Tailwind UI and any other custom components that you might have in your app. So let's get started and make a registration livewire component. We also want to register a route for this. Setting this component up to use Filament Forms. This is easy as implementing the has forms interface and also using the interacts with forms tree. Let's go into our view and copy over our view from Razor UI. I'm going to make the height of this page screen height and get rid of a few things we're not going to use, like the sign in link and the forgotten password link. I'm also going to remove any of these form components because that's what we're going to be using to render our filament form instead. And we need to set this form up for livewire, so get rid of the action, add a livewire action, I'm going to call it register, and also this button needs to be a submit button. Let's visit the page and we can see we've got space for the form in between the heading and the button. We've got 4 components here. We've got a username, email address, password, and its confirmation. I'm not going to use the username. I'm going to use a normal name field because that's what comes with Laravel by default. I'm just going to keep it all simple. So let's add these livewire properties like you would normally. I'm going to bind a form component to each of these properties now. So I'm going to define the get form schema method, returning an array of form components. We're going to have 4 text inputs. Each of these is bound to a different property. You can see our inputs are there now. Let's have a look back. And you might have noticed that the label is different for the email and the confirm password fields. Filament will use the name of the field to automatically generate a label, but we can override this with the label method on our components. Label. Can see they're now fixed. You could also pass in a translation string to the label and make a localized form. Now we've also got some helper text here underneath the email address field, so let's add that with the helper text method. And add some field types. So this is an email field for front-end validation, and these 2 are password fields. And visually, this is everything we need for our form. Now let's add some validation logic. Validation rules can be added to each component individually, and when you add most validation rules, they will apply on both the front end and the back end. So all of these fields need to be required to start with. The name and the email need to be a max length of 255, which is how many characters a string field in Laravel migrations can hold by default. Both of these, I'm going to put a min length on them as 8. And we need to make sure that the password confirmation is the same as the password. Another thing we need to do is add a unique validation rule to the email address. And we can either pass in the table name, users, or we can pass in the class of the user. Let's pass in the class here. And I think that's everything. Let's now define our registration method. So public function register. Now there is a special method on the form instance that we can call, and what this does, it's called getState. It validates all of the fields first, and then it will return all of the validated data that you can then use elsewhere. So I'm just going to DD this for now. You can see what I mean. I'm going to fill the form out with an existing email address so you can see that the unique validation works. And I'm also going to use a password confirmation that's wrong. Email address has already been taken, and the password and password confirmation must match. And as you can see, we've now got an array of all our data. Now, there's a few things that we can do to make our lives easier here, to customize this array, so we don't have to manipulate it before we save it to our model. So, first thing we need to do is remove this password confirmation, because we don't need that. Once it's been validated, it's not important to us. So we're going to pass dehydrated false. And the dehydration process is the process that takes all of the data out of the form. So if you think about it that way, this means that this field is not dehydrated. Another thing we want to do is automatically hash the password if the validation works. So we're going to use a callback function for that inside the dehydrate state using function. And this receives a state, which is the value of the password field. And we're going to hash this and return it. Now let's check again. And as you can see, there is no password confirmation, and the password is automatically hashed for us, so we can save it straight to the database. Let's go above here, user create, and let's pass the state directly to that. And I'm also going to DD the user so you can see that the user has been created. And there you go.